It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Conspiracy theories swirl about geoengineering, but could it help save the planet? Question mark. That new headline from BBC. Here's my question. How's that planet-saving geoengineering going so far as we hurtle toward near-term planetary omnicide? When stacked on top of all other forms of human damage to the planet, climate engineering operations are a tale of heat, drought, deluge, and firestorms, not necessarily in that order or uniformly inflicted. First about the fires, and I'll get to the rest in a moment. From CBS, Park Fire in Northern California explodes in its first day. Can see it from my location, for the record. Arson suspected, but what's the bigger picture? Question mark. The Park Fire grew, the report says, from about 6,400 acres late Wednesday night to 45,000 acres Thursday morning, and then to 71,000 acres Thursday afternoon. And it was something near 150,000 acres by Thursday evening, just over a day. 150,000 acres and still exploding in multiple directions. Anyone remember how much incinerated in Canada last year? About 72,000 square miles, more than the states of Florida or Georgia. And people are going about their lives as if nothing's wrong. And all that feeds mechanisms of collapsing dominoes relating to the climate, putting all that carbon back into the atmosphere. And yes, that matters. When you incinerate forests and you put it back in the atmosphere, it alters atmospheric chemistry. Now let's add climate engineering on top of that. And we know that they're spraying on top of many of these smoke banks because we filmed that. It's in the geoengineering groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming. Blanket aerosol spraying directly on top of the Paradise smoke canopy. Why, I ask? What possible purpose could there be to disperse atmospheric aerosols, according to our rain tests, that include incendiaries like aluminum nanoparticles? Why would that be intentionally sprayed directly on top of a smoke canopy? What can that possibly be but nefarious? Another from CBS. Oregon fire grows large enough to create its own weather as firefighters scramble to battle western blazes. The CBS report continues. The Durkee fire showed such extreme fire behavior on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday that it began creating its own weather system with a pyrocumulus cloud. Again, saw that this week on Thursday from my location looking southeast toward the Park Fire. The pyrocumulus cloud allows the smoke and ash from the fire to travel much higher in the air than it would typically go. The pyrocumulus cloud can also generate lightning, potentially causing new fire starts in the region. How convenient for the geoengineers. The CBS report then states 24 major fires were burning across Oregon under record-breaking dry conditions as the state entered its 76th day without rain Wednesday morning. U.S. Forest Service spokesperson warned of, quote, another monster of a fire year in the Pacific Northwest. Yes, that is the scheduled weather. I've stated that in this broadcast going back months, that this was coming. Parts of the West have also been in the grip of a heat wave, including record-breaking triple-digit temperatures for days. No, not just days. Weeks, now rolling into months. And the total deception of the U.S. Drought Monitor still shows little to no drought in much of the West, which is a blatant, glaring lie. While the East, where the scattered, chemically seeded rain seems to be relentless, the Drought Monitor shows far worse drought than the West. As I've tried to warn about countless times, so many official agencies exist to mask threats from populations, not to disclose them. And in regard to what type of experimentation may be taking place above these smoke canopies, do we think that the U.S. military wouldn't do this? It's a matter of historical record. Even as far back as 1977, and please investigate everything I say, the Washington Post reported that no less than 239 open-air biological tests had been conducted over innocent, unknowing U.S. civilians without their knowledge or consent. How many have been done since? More from CBS. Raging wildfire reaches resort town of Jasper in Canadian Rockies, the largest national park there. Let's add the heat component now. From Axios.com, wildfires erupt in West Canada as well amid major heat wave. A dangerous heat wave, the report says, will continue into the midweek in much of the West as large wildfires burn out of control in several states, particularly California, Oregon, and Washington. Why it matters, the report asks. The combination of heat and wildfire smoke is bringing a significant threat to public health, and smoke from fires burning in Canada may soon move into the U.S. as well. Is that part of the plan? Please, please search this headline title, one of our most important reports. Wildfires serve geoengineering agenda. And no, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. The portion of the U.S. military that certainly is participating in these operations are being told they're doing something benevolent, something for the greater good, which couldn't be further from the truth. The Axios report then states fires have exhibited extreme fire behavior, which makes them more difficult for firefighters to control. Of course it does. The heat is forecast to reach, quote, major to extreme levels on National Weather Service experimental heat risk scales. Through Thursday in the vicinity of Las Vegas, Central Valley of California, Boise, Idaho, Spokane, Washington, and across most of Montana. And some of these regions further east, surface winds of 75, 80 miles an hour. That's now the norm with convective storms, and nobody questions anything. The Axios.com report then states this. Redding, California has gone further and broken every temperature record that existed during a 3-week period. Redding not only saw its hottest single day on record, but also its hottest 2-day period, hottest 3-day period, hottest week, and hottest 3-week period on record. And as bad as all that sounds, nowhere in this report or almost any other article does it mention that nighttime temperatures are rising twice as fast as daytime high temperatures. Again, this case in point, as I've stated previously on this broadcast, in my forest wilderness location, off-grid on the east side of Lake Shasta, the night temperatures have routinely been at 90 degrees or more at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning with about 10 to 15% humidity. That's Death Valley levels. That's about 25 degrees above normal, night after night after night, followed by record hot days with record high UV. We're so far off the rails, so few yet understand or want to understand how devastating the seemingly endless record-shattering heat and ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat domes pushes the air down on the ground, holds it there all night, keeps it stagnant, and that's making all of it, of course, worse still. And what's this all doing to the little wildlife that yet remains? Here's an example. Late in the afternoon on Monday of this week, I went down to a well-shaded spot in my habitat preserve near one of the ponds that I long ago built to help animals make it through the ever-worsening summers from hell. All my efforts over the years to provide water and shaded habitats were not enough. In this case, I was too late. As I trekked up to a tall cottonwood tree that I often sit under when I have a moment, there was the body of a beautiful female deer that had just died, perhaps a few hours earlier, and she had tried to give birth, but the heat won the battle. The fawn was also dead, and judging by her size, she likely had at least one more fawn to birth that never made it out. And I wept. How could I not? I knew and know that countless other animals are meeting the same fate in the forest, even those that are not victims of the exponentially worsening firestorms, which are also connected at the core to climate engineering operations. In so many regions, all is in a state of meltdown. And the consequences are what I discovered at the base of the cottonwood tree. In so many regions around the world, meltdown is unfolding and accelerating. And scattered between the meltdowns are the climate engineering chemical cooldowns where there's enough moisture to mask the severity of what's unfolding, often accompanied by baseball and softball size hail. Cooldowns, at least for the moment. While paradoxically, these cooldowns are making the overall meltdown even worse with every operation they carry out. I couldn't leave this doe and her fawn for predators to devour. Yes, I know the predators need to eat also, but this deer was a familiar friend. I dug a deep hole under a tree and I laid them there to rest, my heart broken, but my blood boiling at all of those that have and are actively or passively participating in the circus of insanity that has delivered us all to this very dark hour. And to those that try to claim all the damage to the planet is just from climate engineering, you're wrong. Your denial of other forms of damage greatly harms the cause of exposing and halting climate engineering. There are countless forms of human insanity and damage to the planet, and it's all sealing our fate. It's not a this or that equation, it's a this and that equation. And to those that claim climate engineering, aka weather warfare, isn't happening, you're even more wrong and willfully blind. Almost nothing in the current industrialized, militarized paradigm is sustainable. It never was. Those that still don't believe it will soon. Wait and see. And to those that tell me, quote, if you don't have a guaranteed solution, don't bring it up. Here's my question to them. Why have you abandoned any sense or semblance of courage? Please break your power structure programming that tries to teach us all from birth that if the odds are against us, that if the story doesn't have a guaranteed happy ending, then turn away, deny it, pretend it isn't so, and hope it goes away. Second question, how's that working so far? So here's a guaranteed happy ending. If when you take your last breath, you can look your maker in the eyes, your children in the eyes, and yourself in the mirror, knowing at your core that you did everything in your power, given your individual circumstances, to make a difference for the better, to man your appointed post to the best of your ability, what story could end better? And if we collectively stand against the gathering storm with this level of unyielding courage and commitment, we may yet accomplish profound good even at this late hour. Those in power could not do what they do without the active or passive support of the majority population. That must change. I will not allow the animals or the trees or any other thread in the web of life to die in vain. I will fight for all of them till my final hour and will save as many as I can along the way. And the same for the children of our world whose futures the vast majority of the human race has forsaken. By not being willing to fully face the darkening horizon, by not being willing to see the cancer of corruption that controls it all for what they are, criminally insane, and holding our collective fate in the extremely near-term balance. Matrix media and all the political circus actors on all sides of the aisle are propaganda-pushing puppets. Their task, whether they're consciously aware of it or not, is to divide and distract populations from the coming train of total ecological and societal collapse till the last possible moment, which now draws very near. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report. The End of the World as We Know It broadcast brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Reaching a critical mass of awareness is the only way forward in this fight. We must reach a critical mass by starting a conversation on climate engineering that leads people to a credible source of data. Geoengineeringwatch.org will continue all of our efforts to be the go-to source on covert climate engineering operations. A conversation on climate engineering can easily be started with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials available on our homepage. And the links from our site can easily, for free, be mailed to countless sites, sources, and individuals that would care if they truly understood what was happening and that they are sinking in the same boat with the rest of us. Please help us to sound the alarm. Moving on. Just how bad is it? New from the UK Independent. 2024 is history's tipping point for climate change. That's not true. We've passed the point of no return to the planet we've previously known at least 2 decades ago. It's in the rearview mirror. And with each passing day that climate intervention operations are allowed to continue, along with countless other forms of human damage to the planet, we are pounding the nails into our collective coffins. Next, this from AccuWeather. Sunday was the hottest day ever recorded on planet Earth. And to all those that reside in the constantly kept cooler and wetter eastern half of the U.S., again, where most of the U.S. population lives, the world is far larger than what you see outside your front door. For the record, the eastern half of the U.S. lower 48 is about 1% of the Earth's surface area, hardly a snapshot of the world as a whole. And the world's largest military, aka the U.S. military, has gone to great length to keep the most populated portions of the U.S. off and on chemically cooled. Chemical ice nucleation for weather modification, again, baseball and softball size hail. Now, accompanying that and the hurricane force straight line winds that are part of the process now to augment the endothermic reacting materials that are being seeded into the clouds, all part of the same core of insanity. With all that in mind, this parallel report from the UK Guardian Sunday was the world's hottest ever recorded day. Preliminary data from Copernicus suggests temperature records were shattered, taking the world into, quote, uncharted territory. The report says what is truly staggering is how large the difference is between the temperature of the last 13 months and the previous temperature records. The finding comes as large parts of the world roast in punishing heat. The Berkeley Earth Data Project said the record was, quote, certainly a worrying sign on the back of 13 record-setting months. Another for the record note. No official agency is even reporting on the extreme UV radiation levels from Earth's disintegrating ozone layer, frying foliage, insects, plankton, crops, and us. Yes, the UV makes the overall heat even worse, though no official agency says a word about it, or the climate engineering operations that are the core cause of ozone layer disintegration. The meltdown continues to accelerate. From CNBC, world shatters heat record for second time in just 2 days. Sunday's reign as the hottest day ever recorded on the planet Earth lasted until Monday. From theatlantic.com, the hottest day in 125,000 years, question mark. This is a new report, but for those that remember, this headline has already been played over a year ago. We broke through that barrier then and have 13 consecutive record-breaking months since, with sea surface temperatures breaking records for well over 400 days in a row. And let's not forget that we're now about 560 or 570 months in a row of above-average global temperatures, even with a temperature baseline that has intentionally been manipulated to hide much of the warming, and even with the official high temperatures being routinely underreported, not overreported. And still, in spite of all this, the records continue to tumble everywhere, and many aren't even being reported. And yes, it is that bad. It's worse than that bad. And though I have no more love for Al Gore and all the environmental groups than anyone else, the truth is the truth. And the truth is that we face something that's far worse than, quote, climate change. We're already circling the drain into an abrupt climate collapse scenario with climate engineering, aka weather warfare, making all of it even worse, not better. And how is it possible that so many even now are so willfully blind to the shockingly obvious and rationally undeniable decimation the human race as a whole has inflicted on this formerly thriving planet, again with climate engineering operations at the top of the list? Next, from gbnews.com, U.S. weather, killer heat wave sparks major warnings across America. From that report, a killer heat wave has turned a 1,000-mile stretch of America into a wildfire tinderbox. Fresh government warnings are in force as the hottest ever start to summer in parts of the country continues to rage. Temperatures could rise 10 to 20 degrees C above the average, one expert claimed. That's extraordinarily high temperatures. Violent storms triggered by extreme heat will drive the risk of fires as lightning strikes parched ground. The, quote, dry thunderstorm threat will be highest in regions kept under the rainless heat dome. Anybody who listens to this broadcast should know what that is by now. Ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat dome. They can keep it in place as long as they want. And they say the heat dome will, quote, drive the risk of fires. Around the edge of the heat dome, battling weather fronts will spark ferocious thunderstorms. Fierce heat across America since June is the result of a high-pressure heat dome, which has fired the mercury to record levels. Stubborn high pressure often remains wedged in place, they say, allowing heat to build and keep rain at bay. It's exactly what they do. They say this increase will risk fires spreading once they have started. Learn what ionosphere heaters are and what they do. Start with HARP. They are a weapon of mass destruction that can cause an electrical chain reaction in the ionosphere by transmitting extraordinary amounts of power. In the case of HARP, 3.6 million watts. That heats the atmosphere, expanding it up and down. The downward push compresses the air, heats it even more than it already would be. And around that is a clockwise rotating in the northern hemisphere upper level wind current. Storms can spark around that. The desiccant particles from climate engineering can dry out these storms and increase their static buildup, which means more dry lightning. Please search the Engineering Wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to learn how wildfires serve the geoengineering agenda. In fact, search the report with that exact title. Wildfires serve geoengineering agenda. One of our most important reports. You won't like what you learn. From MSN, Microsoft Network, which is part of MSM, mainstream media. Europe scorches as fires rage. Tourists and residents flee. From Euronews.com, chaotic weather in Europe ravages Denmark and Spain. How much of this do we see on U.S. Matrix media while we're watching non-stop scripted political theater? We don't see any of this. Even on the climate engineering cover-up entities like Weather Channel, Weather Central, etc., see almost none of this. From phys.org, quote, "It's unbearable. Heat waves scorch southern and eastern Europe." From that report, unrelenting heat is blanketing swaths of southern and eastern Europe, with dozens of cities on red alert as scorching temperatures fuel wildfires, strain power grids, and make daily life unbearable. In Italy, zookeepers have given animals ice blocks to ward off heat stroke as temperatures soared, while 14 cities, including Florence, Palermo, Bologna, were placed on red alert. In Hungary, which has been under a maximum heat warning, searing temperatures have warped an airport runway, while state-run train operators urged passengers to take air-conditioned buses instead of its outdated rail cars. In all these regions, the report says deadly wildfires have accompanied the tender, dry conditions all over the world. And keep in mind that climate engineering controls the spigot, how much it rains, where it rains, and how toxic that rain is. So what happens when the forests are fried, the farmland is baked, and the store shelves empty out? That blank isn't hard to fill in. Welcome to Mad Max on a global scale. Haiti is a snapshot of what's coming for us all on the current course, and about 36 other countries are already following in Haiti's footsteps of total collapse. On top of ecological collapse, did Western powers also have a hand in Haiti's fate? Do some honest research. You won't like what you learn. From Euronews.com, droughts, desertification, heat waves. The climate crisis hits Sicily hard. They're being brutalized there. Just one example of so many. From theconversation.com, extreme heat waves broiling the U.S. in 2024 aren't normal. A little bit of truth there, yes. How climate change is heating up weather around the world. So much more to that story. The giant elephant in the equation, always omitted. Criminal omission. And all those who helped facilitate this climate engineering cover-up should be held legally and morally accountable by a justifiably enraged population once they're awakened to what has occurred. Let's hope that moment comes soon. I live for that day. Legally and morally accountable. The proverbial pitchforks and torches moment. From sciencehub.com, one of Earth's major carbon sinks collapsed in 2023. What are they talking about? Forests. But it didn't just happen in 2023. Geoengineeringwatch.org and myself were sounding the alarm in 2008. Why did it take the science community 15 more years? First full-page ad, paid for by Geoengineeringwatch.org, 2008, stating the forests were collapsing. Takes the science community 15 more years to tell the truth. From Al Jazeera, UN chief calls for action to stem extreme heat epidemic. Is the UN exposing climate engineering? Because the most extreme heat occurs under high-pressure heat domes, period. No effort to expose that, not from the UN. From Scientific American, it's going to be 90 degrees in Alaska this week. That's a lot for Alaska. And some temperatures in the Siberian Arctic have peaked over 100 in the recent past. And no one seems to care or understand the gravity of that. Let's keep going. About those hot nights, many don't understand how dire a problem that is. From ABC News, world's sleep being chipped away by hotter nights. Far hotter. From Climate Central, scorching days followed by sweltering nights. From the Boston Globe, remember when it used to cool down at night? ? Then they say, more than greenhouse gases to blame? ? Are they alluding to the climate engineering elephant in the equation? I'm not holding my breath, but let's hope so. From the Weather Network, after Earth's year of historic heat, how close are we to passing the 1.5 degrees C limit? How long will this lie continue to be perpetuated? That's my question. We've blown past the 1.5 C limit about 2 decades ago. It's total data falsification. We're likely past 3.5 degrees C now, being hidden by climate engineering, chemical ice nucleation operations, and the flash cooldowns at the surface that they cause. A lot of data is collected to skew the equation to the downside. Official high temperatures are being underreported, not overreported. That's the fact of the matter. It has nothing to do with liking or disliking Al Gore. Don't like him. Don't know anybody who does. But the truth is still the truth. If Mr. Gore said it's daytime, and it is, should we take the position that it's nighttime? Even if it isn't? I think not. Those that are and have been controlling conflicts and carnage around the world, aka the money printers, are also ultimately the manipulators at the helm of climate engineering operations. Connect the dots. From findgovernmentgrantservice.gov. This report headline, Modeling Environmental Responses to Solar Radiation Management. This report states, apply for funding to carry out climate modeling to understand the impacts of solar radiation management, SRM technologies, if implemented at scale, which has been for many decades. They say you must be based at a UK research organization eligible for NERC funding. There is no limit, they say, on the value of the grant, end quote. As much money as you want to help them figure out just how much damage these operations are doing, pretending they're not ongoing, but knowing they are. Again, money is no object. For those that print the money from thin air with nothing to back it up but total control of major media and the propaganda they push, from conflict zones to climate engineering and the official denial of all of it. This is the case. Just keep the herd calm and believing that the Ponzi scheme stock market will always go up. McDonald's will always have Big Macs, and Walmart will always have full shelves. Keep the normalcy bias epidemic stoked till the moment of impact. Let's take a moment to examine that term. It's important because it is an absolute epidemic. Normalcy bias definition. Normalcy bias or normality bias is a cognitive bias which leads people to disbelieve or minimize threat warnings. Consequently, individuals underestimate the likelihood of a disaster when it might affect them and its potential adverse effects on them. The normalcy bias affliction causes many people to prepare inadequately for natural disasters or unnatural ones, market crashes, calamities caused by human error. They then say approximately 80% of people reportedly display normalcy bias during a disaster. Normalcy bias has also been called analysis paralysis, aka the ostrich effect. And then this very important bottom line conclusion. Normalcy bias has been described as, quote, one of the most dangerous biases we face, end quote. So true. Let's add this. Denial. Denial is an extremely common psychological defense mechanism that people use to cope with or avoid uncomfortable situations, emotions, or facts. Cognitive dissonance is another psychological phenomenon closely related to denial or normalcy bias. When people experience cognitive dissonance, they feel a deep sense of discomfort due to holding two contradictory beliefs. To resolve this discomfort, individuals may attempt to rationalize their experiences by dismissing critically important information in order to maintain their existing beliefs, which can contribute to or exacerbate normalcy bias. Now, with all that in mind, please listen to the spin that Matrix Media tries to put on the scenarios just mentioned. This is where the insidiousness of the cancer in control becomes so evident. The money printers control the narrative, and here's their narrative. Quote, disbelief and denial can lead to the development of conspiracy theories, aka any information that conflicts with the official propaganda and lies. The Matrix Media quote continues, these theories often arise as alternative explanations for events provided as a means to support existing beliefs without confronting the uncomfortable reality of a situation. In that statement, Matrix Media is, of course, referring to conflicts with or disbelief of their fully spun version of so-called reality. Matrix Media then says conspiracy theories can contribute to the perpetuation of normalcy bias by creating a false sense of security, which in turn can hinder individuals from properly processing and responding to threats. Wait, what doesn't make sense in that last statement from Matrix Media? Those that see through the smoke and mirrors of the Matrix are more prone to, quote, normalcy bias, and thus that hinders them from, quote, processing and responding to threats, end quote. Really? In fact, isn't the exact opposite true? Yes, those who see through the ever-worsening and deepening lies have the best chance of dealing with what's coming, which includes what is and has been taking place in skies over our heads all over the world for so very long. So-called experts from official climate engineering cover-up sources make it up as they go when it comes to the filth in our skies and the high-pressure heat domes and everything that goes with climate intervention operations, and the extremely anomalous weather radar patterns that are a direct result of climate engineering operations and the reflective aerosol particles that they are saturating our skies with. The so-called experts have told us that some of the 1,000 square mile or larger anomalous blips on weather radars are everything from trillions of ladybugs or grasshoppers or dragonflies, pollen, Saharan dust coming from regions many thousands of miles away. Really? It's just Saharan dust blotting out our formerly blue skies, and there's nothing else going on? Just ignore the geoengineering jet grid patterns and filth-filled skies. And no, it isn't just jet exhaust, as endless film footage and ever higher mountains of data prove beyond rational doubt. Yes, just Saharan dust and jet exhaust. Nothing to see here. Move along. Question, is such a narrative perhaps comparable to steel structure high-rise buildings that fall down at free fall speed 3 in one day? None have ever fallen before or since, no matter how long they burned. And yet, we're told, if we don't accept the official yarn about dire events, that we're clearly not what we were told, we'll be officially accused of suffering from normalcy bias? Such a conclusion makes zero sense because it's wrong. It's exactly backward. So, about the weather and the often absurd radar anomalies that the so-called experts tell us are massive 1,000 square mile clouds of ladybugs, grasshoppers, dragonflies, billions of birds all taking off at the same time, even though the birds are so few and far between now, or Saharan dust. Here's a question. Could the illegal federal gag order on all National Weather Service and National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration personnel have anything to do with their fantastic yarns that always also deny climate engineering everything? You decide. And when the geoengineers shut down the so-called Saharan dust, will they commence with letting loose and manipulating the coming cyclonic rotations? We'll soon enough find out. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 468, July 27th, 2024. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations, aka geoengineering. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. Geoengineering Watch and I wish to express our deepest gratitude to those that have helped us to expand our reach and thus our voice in this absolutely desperate last-hour effort to sound the alarm. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities and is so close to 20 million views now, thanks to all of you. The best way to share is by circulating the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment, all of which helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. About reaching those that still aren't looking up. Again, starting a conversation is absolutely a key to the door, and Geoengineering Watch awareness raising materials are designed to do exactly that. They can be found on our homepage. Our only goal is to provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. are extremely high quality printed materials, shocking images, satellite images, federal gag order, and the basics of this issue we pass on for less than our cost of producing, printing, shipping these materials. I live for the day when this issue is fully exposed and we have a chance of turning the tide in the right direction, at least. We have Geoengineering Watch hoodies and shirts also. Photos of those are on our homepage. We have scannable business cards and bumper stickers. Scan codes on the cards, again, take people straight to the dimming or straight to our homepage. No one refuses those cards. All effective tools to strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. And reaching a critical mass of awareness is the only way forward in this fight. We must stop it from the inside out. We have to awaken our military brothers and sisters as to what they're participating in, what they're being used for, not what they're being told. Their families need to know. Families of defense industry contractors need to know as well. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch shirt or hoodie, ideally in some crowded location, please send us your photo so that we can post it as part of our activist compilation, which is now part of our materials page. The images do encourage others to make their voices heard in this all-important battle to sound the alarm. Again, to all those that are doing everything they can given their personal circumstances and scenarios to move this fight forward, my deepest gratitude to you. And it is all of us marching together in this fight that can yet make a difference. We are all spokes in the wheel, all of us necessary to make it roll forward. Moving on, about our ubiquitously polluted planet. From the Idaho County Free Press, 73.3% of Idaho lakes are too polluted for swimming. Wow. I must have missed that nugget when I read the Idaho tourist brochure. The report continues, for many Americans, lakes and rivers provide a much-needed escape, a place to cool off on a hot day, which is all the time now, isn't it? At least if you're in the western U.S., relax with loved ones or simply enjoy the beauty of nature. However, water quality remains a major public health concern across large portions of the United States. According to data from the Environmental Protection Agency, over 70% of freshwater lakes and ponds, reservoirs, wetlands by acreage, and over 42% of creeks, rivers, and streams by mileage are considered too polluted for primary contact. And yes, a lot of emphasis on that word because we're not even supposed to touch it. Don't swim in it. Don't do anything in it. Let's stop there for the record. And as bad as this report sounds, it's short of the truth. As already cited on this broadcast, wild fish caught from 500 locations in the U.S. were all contaminated. No exceptions. This report stated that to eat just one of these fish was comparable to drinking a month's worth of contaminated water. Another peer-reviewed report has conclusively confirmed that every single drop of rain on planet Earth is contaminated, and not just by any contamination, but PFAS forever chemicals, and who can say what else, as we know from all of our rain testing at geoengineeringwatch.org, that climate engineering elements are also present in the precipitation, which is yet another toxic brew of heavy metals, polymers, surfactants, graphene, the list goes on and on. So in summary, everything everywhere is contaminated, no exceptions. Welcome to the asylum. From the Oregonian.com, Oregon's underwater forests are vanishing. Can they be saved? ? From that report. From the Atlantic to the Pacific, from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, rising water temperatures and more frequent heat waves are changing what's found under the surface. It's killing what's found under the surface. The extreme UV radiation from Earth's collapsing ozone layer are part of this equation. The report continues, kelp is one of the world's fastest growers, rising at a rate of up to 10 inches per day and reaching heights of up to 100 feet, establishing itself as the sequoia of the seas. A study chronicled the abrupt decline of kelp by more than 90% in 2014. Underwater kelp forests are key to combating climate change. They can sequester, the report says, up to 20 times more carbon per acre than land forests. Oops, just one slight problem. Almost all of the world's kelp forests have already died due to our, again, superheating, deoxygenating, stratifying, UV-baked seas, aka Canfield Ocean. Look that one up. The so-called climate science community always grabbing at total fantasy so-called solutions that have already all but been eliminated from the equation, never to return in any time frame that matters, but they still cite these as so-called solutions. The miraculous kelp forest in which I spent so many countless hours over so many years, now all but gone, which breaks my heart, and short of a complete course correction, the human race will soon follow. About the firestorms, incinerations. Here's some breaking headlines. And when you're done with this broadcast, try searching and reviewing the Engineering Wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org if you're willing to face verifiable data that will alarm you to the core. And this specific headline again, wildfires serve geoengineering agenda. From OregonLive.com, Oregon has nearly as many fires burning as Washington, Idaho, and California combined. This is a follow-up on headlines mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast. From the Washington Post, a post-fire nightmare in New Mexico, 8 floods in 4 weeks. Again, geoengineering controls the spigot. Flash drought, firestorm, flash flood to truly decimate the inhabitants. Back to back to back and blame nature. Reminder, again, record drought, record firestorms, record deluge, all hallmarks of climate intervention operations. From Bangor Daily News, more main roads may be abandoned as climate change brings worse floods. No mention of climate engineering, of course. From CNN, floods inundate Philippine capital. Need to see film images of that. It's truly catastrophic. Oil tanker sinks as deadly typhoon prompts calls for climate action. Like climate engineering? Is that what they mean? The CNN report continues. Much of the Philippine capital remained underwater Thursday after deadly typhoon Gamy worsened. Torrential monsoon rains that lashed the country, trapping people in rising floodwaters and causing widespread damage. The storm made landfall in China's southeast coastal province Thursday evening, bringing more strong winds and downpours to a country already hit hard by weeks of extreme rain and deadly flooding. We can't even get a cloud here in the western U.S., not a real one, that's not tainted by aerosol filth. And other areas are being inundated day after day after day by deluge. They say countries in the South Seas are reaching their limit of being able to handle climate and extreme weather disasters on their own, and those living in low-lying coastal areas will soon lose their homes, rising to sea levels. That is definitely the case. Plenty of film footage to prove that. From AP News, Typhoon Gamy hits China coast after leaving 25 dead in Taiwan and the Philippines. Stay with me. These headlines are leading somewhere. There's puzzle pieces to connect here. From the UK Independent, Typhoon Gamy, everything we know about the strongest storm to hit Taiwan in 8 years. Let's add this potential puzzle piece, new from Al Jazeera. Taiwan holds war games amid tensions and typhoon. What you need to know, Al Jazeera asks. Here's another from Al Jazeera, since they cover what most Western media won't. Taiwan says record number of Chinese warplanes detected amid NATO summit. Let's add this. Again from Al Jazeera. Is this headline related to all of it? China halts nuclear arms talks with U.S. over Taiwan support. Beijing said the U.S. weapons sales to Taiwan has compromised the political atmosphere for continued talks on nuclear non-proliferation. Is this weather warfare? The governments that have formally colluded and cooperated around the globe, which is certainly the case, climate engineering can't go on otherwise. We have Senate documents, some up to 800 pages long, specifically citing the international cooperation because of the cross-border ramifications of climate engineering, cooperation between even otherwise adversarial countries, aka China, Russia, US. Is that breaking down now? Just like mafia families who collude and cooperate to a point until there's not enough to go around and everything starts to hit the fan, and then the infighting starts. Is that what's going on here? Because let's not forget that the U.S. military started its hurricane modification operations in 1947 with Project Cirrus. How far have they come since? Let's add this headline. Is a global nuclear arms race underway? Question mark. A report finds nuclear powers have increased spending on a scale never before seen. Ongoing armed conflicts are said to be the reason. So does that mean atomic weapons are likely to be used? Question mark. And has nuclear deterrence failed? Question mark. Here's my question. Could we have a more shocking harbinger of human insanity than this? The planet's life support systems are collapsing, resources are waning, global omnicide is unfolding by the day, and another arms race is underway? Again, I ask, if some outside intelligent life form was observing the behavior of the human race, why would they help us? When the majority of populations just keep waving their flags in full support of the clearly criminally insane controllers Whatever side of the fence people are on makes no difference. They're two sides of the same coin, designed to distract and divide populations, to polarize them until the moment of impact. How well it's working. From Yahoo News, scientists make troubling discovery after examining overlooked phenomenon with Antarctica's ice shelves. Slush is difficult to detect, the report says, from satellite imagery, and it leads to the generation of 2.8 times more meltwater than they thought. The report then states, quote, "This could have profound implications for ice shelf stability and sea level rise," end quote. Really? You think? Just one more example of, oh, it's way worse than we thought. Exactly as geoengineeringwatch.org has stated on so many issues for so many years, and now mainstream so-called science is having to admit to it because they can no longer hide it. And why does this matter to all of us? Because half the boat doesn't sink. When the planet's life support systems, and this is part of it, this is the planet's air conditioner, and when this fails, everything changes, and it's changing now by the day. It's almost inhospitable for life where I live in the forest of Northern California. 110 in the daytime and 90 degrees at night. Everything is dying here. Not just the deer I described earlier. Everything is in some stage of decline or dead. Yes, some life survives around ponds and certain places, and from a distance, some people that don't know what a tree should look like might not know how bad they look. Everything's in decline, and it's happening around the world. Let's add this from NBC News. Melting ice is slowing Earth's spin, shifting its axis, and even influencing its inner core, research shows. Two new studies suggest human behavior has changed foundational elements of the planet's physical properties. Climate change is altering the Earth to its literal core. New research has concluded as polar and glacial ice melts because of global warming, climate engineering attempt to hide it, making it worse. Water that was once concentrated at the top and the bottom of the globe is getting redistributed toward the equator. The extra mass around Earth's middle slows its rotation, which in turn has a lengthening effect on our days. A new study offers more evidence of that dynamic and further suggests that changes to the planet's ice have been profound enough to affect Earth's axis, the invisible line at its center around which it rotates. Together, those shifts are causing feedback beneath the surface, affecting the fluids that move around in Earth's molten core. Humans have tinkered with foundational elements of the planet's physical properties, a process that will continue until sometime after global temperatures stabilize and the melting of ice sheets reaches a new equilibrium. In general, the speed of Earth's spin depends on the shape of the planet and where its mass is distributed, factors governed by several counteracting forces. For example, when ice skaters spin, think of this example, and their arms are outstretched, their rotation will be slower. But if skaters' arms are kept in tight, they spin faster. Think about it. Same with the migrating poles of the planet, the magnetic poles. Is this a chicken or egg scenario? So again, this question, are the current anthropogenic Earth changes, which includes the already catastrophic damage from ongoing climate intervention operations, are these impacts so profound that they are influencing the migration of the magnetic poles? Whatever the case, we are hurtling toward extremely near-term planetary omnicide, not opinion, mathematical, statistical fact. And again, this question, are the controllers desperately trying to thin the herd from countless directions? Let's add this puzzle piece from the UK Guardian. PFAS, forever chemicals, widely added to U.S. pesticides despite EPA denial, study finds. The report says research shows forever chemicals increasingly found in products as agency claims the chemicals aren't being used. Toxic PFAS forever chemicals are widely added to pesticides and are increasingly used in the products in recent years. New research has found a practice that creates a health threat by spreading the dangerous compounds directly into the U.S.'s food and water supply. The analysis of active and inert ingredients that the Environmental Protection Agency has approved for use in pesticides proves recent agency claims that the chemicals aren't used in pesticides are false. The researchers also obtained documents that suggest the EPA hides some of its findings that shows PFAS in pesticides. About 14% of all active ingredients in the country's pesticides are, in fact, PFAS forever chemicals, a figure that has doubled to more than 30% of all ingredients approved during the last 10 years. Is it any wonder this stuff is everywhere? The increased PFAS use in pesticides is, quote, disturbing, said Kyla Bennett, a former EPA official now with the Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility nonprofit and study co-author. The former EPA official stated, quote, "They're spraying them on crops, and there's not a more direct way to expose the population to PFAS forever chemicals than that." Now let's add this. Pesticides are as big a cancer risk as smoking. New study finds the widespread use of pesticides may lead to hundreds of thousands of additional cancer cases in major agricultural producing states like Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Ohio, and we don't even know what they're spraying on us from the sky. Keep in mind there's no regulations for anything they do up there by design. We only know what we've looked for and found. Who knows what else is there that we don't know to look for? The report says even for Americans who don't work on farms, these dangers still exist, according to findings published in Frontiers in Cancer Control and Society. The insect-killing chemicals have been linked to lung cancer, pancreatic cancer, colon cancer, and leukemia in both children and adults. Question, is this all part of the plan? And again, we don't know what's raining down through our skies, the totality of it. We can't know without knowing what to look for. So here's a thought to consider. In the eyes of the power structure, given the planet's now failing life support systems, are we, global populations, the power structure's insects? Are they culling the herd? Could the answer to that question be any more clear at this point? How long have they been working on this objective, and in how many ways? And if the thinning isn't going fast enough for them, what final cards are the controllers prepared to play? Look up. How long can you hold your breath? Because there's no place to hide from what's being sprayed in our skies, or what may be sprayed soon, as global chaos and carnage accelerates and expands. Paradoxically, many who recognize some of the controllers' crimes and are against those crimes, on other occasions blindly wave their flags in full support of the Matrix manipulators and the neck-deep propaganda that is pumped out to hide their crimes. Who are the manipulators of the Matrix, and how do we know one when we see one? Any who took the time to view the speech made on the floor of Congress this week, the one with no less than 58 standing ovations, should certainly be able to connect the dots. This individual only needs to show up, and he's immediately granted the full focus and attention of the U.S. government, and an army of law enforcement descends on D.C. to quell any protests of his presence, while the whole of so-called U.S. government elected officials respond like trained monkeys to every statement made, in spite of the fact that history has long since proven this man and those behind the curtain whom he represents have long since been the tail wagging the dog, have long since been manipulating the U.S. into carrying out their agendas and their objectives in one form or another. No dissenting viewpoints, no matter how grounded and factually verifiable, are allowed toward all I have just alluded to. None. What should that tell you? Again, in summary, stop, think, consider. The core of power that commands all that is taking place in our skies are also at the head of orchestrating conflict, chaos, and carnage around the world. How could it possibly be otherwise? As the planet's life support systems spiral toward total collapse, the warmongers are making more weapons and planning more wars. What a surprise. The following quotes were sent to me in an email that came from former U.S. Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. Cynthia has always been courageous to the core. I had the pleasure and honor of having lunch with Cynthia in LA some years back. Here are several foundational quotes from key historical figures in her message. First, this from President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. This is not a way of life at all, in any true sense. Under the clouds of war, Eisenhower states, it is humanity hanging on a cross of iron. And there is this from Robert Kennedy, Cape Town, June 6, 1966. Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. Lastly, and most importantly this, silence is the most deadly weapon of mass destruction. Martin Luther King stated silence is betrayal. But some might ask, to whom and to what? Here's the answer: to everything that matters. Our will and the correct use of it is all that we own. All else can, and soon enough may, be taken. Solace, true solace that can't be taken away, can only come from knowing at your core that you're courageously manning your appointed post, that you're exercising courage in spite of fear, that you're not yielding to the darkness, and knowing with every fiber of your being that you never will. If we stand together, if we share credible data from a credible source, if we start spot fires of awareness and ask others to do the same, the awakening will be unstoppable. We could yet pull back the curtain. We could expose those behind it. We could trigger a shockwave around the world. We could alter the paradigm in the right direction. Could this mean that our troubles would be over? Absolutely not. They're just beginning. But consider the proverb, to set a single foot on a righteous path is to have arrived. The journey is the destination. The destination is the journey. Never, ever underestimate the power you have to make a difference. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific details on how you can move this fight forward. Please, make your voice heard, make every day count. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.